Bangladesh's ousted Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina has today been sentenced to death after being convicted of crimes against humanity for ordering a deadly crackdown on a student-led uprising last year.
That is sentence of death.
A short time ago, the International Crimes Tribunal in Dhaka delivered the verdict amid tight security, with the gallery bursting into applause when the death penalty was announced. Ms. Hasina, who fled to India as the protests intensified last August, was represented by a state-appointed defence, who said the charges against her were baseless. And in response to today's decision, Sheikh Hasina said she was given no fair chance to defend herself in court, and that the verdicts against her were made by a rigged tribunal presided over by an unelected government with no democratic mandate. National elections in Bangladesh are expected to be held in February. So let's get more on this now with Sreeradha Datta, a professor at the Jindal School of International Affairs in New Delhi. Sreeradha, good to have you with us today. Now, take us through this ruling. Was this the verdict, one that most observers, including yourself, had expected?
I would think so, because if you see, the charges that were labeled against her during the July uprising, when unarmed students were at the receiving end of security forces and the kind of, and you see during the verdict also, they played out a lot of the instruction that she was sending out and discussing with the Home Minister. So clearly, I mean, there were so many evidences that were gathered over the last 1 year and more. There was, I don't think, any question in anybody's mind about the fact that a very harsh punishment was awaiting her.
Yes, of course, she continues to have a degree of support back home with her Awami League. Do you expect perhaps her supporters to be out on the streets? And do we expect any unrest on the streets of Dhaka and beyond?
Absolutely. For the last couple of weeks, we've seen how she has been using the international media to, build a counter narrative about the crime charges against her. She's openly incited violence. She has said that her party members are, they should put the Bangladesh on a national lockdown. So clearly, she's very much been urging them to come out on the streets. We've seen over the last couple of days also lots of pockets of violence taking place all over Bangladesh, not only just Dhaka. Today, of course, we saw security forces were alert, and I think it's expected, while the verdict was expected, the fact that Awami League supporters, and they're a very large party, and probably the largest party, of course, the oldest party in Bangladesh. So their capacity to create street chaos is not unexpected, and I think the security forces or the administration would be very much aware, and I hope they've accordingly taken action.
So what's next for Sheikh Hasina? It doesn't seem like she might want to go back to Bangladesh to challenge the verdict and the sentences. She's taking refuge in India. What might we expect to happen with her in the coming, I suppose, days and months?
She could have actually had the case been so, because when the charges started, the ICT trial started, there were many times when Bangladesh, the interim government had requested for her extradition, which of course government of India didn't, talked about and had absolutely no reason to comply with. But Sheikh Hasina herself, of course, showed no interest in going back, because she realized this, while of course, as I mentioned, her party supporters continue to be there, but there's a large amount of public anger about her and her activities, not just for the July uprising, but for the last 10, 12 years, the kind of things that she's done. So at this point of time, now that the verdict is out, I don't see any reason or, for her to think of even going back at this point of time. And of course, so far as the government of India is concerned, I don't think there is any scope for India even considering any such extradition request, any such thing forward. But I guess a legal process will be initiated all over again. But Sheikh Hasina herself, I mean, from whatever we've seen of the last few days of interviews and elsewhere, that she has completely negated all these charges. And even today, a statement has just come out saying that it's a very politically motivated verdict, on baseless charges. So clearly, she's not toning down her, her point of view. And I don't see how, under these present circumstances, she can ever go back to Bangladesh.
Yes, and given the strength of evidence you were talking about earlier, does that put India in a rather, confusing situation or a difficult position internationally, given the evidence that was there? Might this verdict and decision force a change from India and possibly consider extradition to Bangladesh?
That sounds logical, really, if India was to do that, but I very much doubt it. And though we recently heard our, I think, national security advisors say that there was a faulty governance or whatever, something like that, in terms of Hasina's regime. But I think, irrespective of what India believes or has reason to believe, the position so far as Sheikh Hasina is concerned, she's a guest, and India is going to support her and keep her safe. I think that's the government of India position, irrespective of what they think about what happened in the last 10, 15 years.
Yes, and do you also believe that if and when these elections are held, how significant support does she have? By extension, her party have, the Awami League, when the elections happen in February?
So as of now, what we know is that Awami League, there's a ban on Awami League activities. So they are not going to be contesting the election. But we also know that BNP, which is the other large party of Bangladesh, has been constantly asking for Awami League's participation, saying that, let's include everyone and all of that. But the way I see it, and with this particular verdict out today, it is very unlikely that Awami League is going to be coming in as a participant in the coming election. But if, and I hope it's going to be a free and fair election that takes place, the likelihood of a elected party taking over and a government formation is very much on the cards. Yes, Awami League cadres and members there are going to create mayhem, as I mentioned. They have the capacity to do that. But also, let's remember that large number of Awami leaders have actually fled Bangladesh. It's not just the former Prime Minister. Many of our ministers have all, living in different, the majority living in India also, but a large number living outside in various parts. So it's only the workers really left there, and a few handful of Awami League high-level members. But so it's going to be chaos and violence and all of that. But I don't really see how they're going to challenge elections, really. And I'm sure the administration is aware of their activities and their the ploy, really. But at the same time, I sincerely hope that elections are on track, and whichever way it is, whatever parties that we see can come in for a multi-party election.
And of course, behind this trial and verdict are the more than 1,000 victims who died during the crackdown. Will this verdict in any way bring comfort to the families of those who died?
I think as per the UN estimate, 1422 people died. And I think, the number is also pretty low, because wherever I've gone back to Dhaka, students have mentioned there are many of them who are injured, wounded, continue to be under treatment in the hospital. So the numbers likely, if you do take another number now, would probably be higher. So clearly there is that, and I've had several times I've been interacting with the youths, part of them who've been part of the uprising. They can't forgive the horrors. They can't forget the horrors, and they can't forgive the kind of activities that was unleashed on them. So, and they and their families, at least, it's no solace to somebody when you lost your close and dear ones, but at least some form of justice for them, I guess. Yes, of course.
Okay.
It's a sad day. One shouldn't be, celebrating, as you mentioned earlier, in terms of, the cheers that came up in the verdict. When in a capital punishment, it's not something that at least I certainly don't. But it's a day, I think there should be introspection, both in Awami and elsewhere. But it's a sad day, but it's a day that was, I think, inevitable.
Okay, Sreeradha Datta, really appreciate your insights there from New Delhi. Thank you so much.
Thank you.